Hi, welcome back to another video. My name is Adrian. Thank you for joining me again. Today we are going to talk about proportions. All right, so before we get into proportions, there are a couple things we need to go over first, but if you haven't done so already, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. First, let's go over a couple things that I believe will help lay the foundation to understand proportions, which is shape and forms. Shapes being two-dimensional and helps you to understand how to draw the human form in two-dimensional space and how to represent the body parts in two dimensions, whereas forms help you see the human body in three-dimensional space, but in a simplified way. So once you understand how to represent the human body in 2D shapes, then, like, again, once you understand the proportions of those 2D shapes, then you have the same, like, the next level of understanding of how to turn that same shape in three-dimensional space while retaining the proportions, the correct proportions. So the body can be represented by these three basic forms and shapes. And then once you have that, we can build upon it. Having a basic understanding of perspective will help when drawing forms. So I want to quickly go over 1 point and 2 point perspective. 1 point perspective is when you have one vanishing point on your horizon line. Your side lines, your side corners recede back into that 1 point, while your front facing plane lines are parallel to the horizon. So with 2 point, it's very similar, except that it has two vanishing points on the horizon line. The right edges recede to the right vanishing point, while the left edges recede to the left vanishing point. All the other lines are just vertical. They don't recede to any additional vanishing point. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a separate video and go more in depth about perspective. But otherwise, continue practicing drawing cubes in 1 point and 2 point perspective because it will really help you in the long run of how to learn to draw things in three-dimensional space. All right, now let's get into human proportions. Typically, when you're drawing an adult, they are roughly around 8 heads high. Somewhere 8.5, but mostly eight heads high. So, but I'm not thinking about the head height when I'm drawing. Honestly, I'm thinking about the three major masses. I'm thinking about the head shape, or the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis. Those three masses are your main masses that are going to help you with proportion. So if you see here, the arms fall midway the abdomen, and that lower part of the arm falls about just below the pelvis. Probably about, if you stretch out the fingers, probably about halfway or just above the halfway point of the thigh. When you're drawing the human form, if you know where these three masses, some people have longer torsos than others, but for the most part, if you space out these three masses, you'll be able to find where the lower part of your hand falls, mid-thigh, and you'll be able to adjust your proportions as you draw, right? If the arm is a little too long, if the hand is coming down to the kneecap, it's way too long. And then you can go from there. So the thigh, upper thigh, and the lower leg are the same height, the same length. And the same with the upper arm and the lower arm. They're both the same length. So that way you'll know if your proportions are off, if the lower arm is longer than the upper arm, if the lower leg is longer than the upper leg, or vice versa, then you know to adjust your proportions. Otherwise, you just want to focus on the three major masses. That's going to be your guiding light of if your proportions are off or not. Spacing out the head from the rib cage to the pelvis, because if your neck is super long, it's not, you know your proportions are off. If your abdomen is super long, you're going to know your proportions are off. Yes, some people have longer abdomens than others, but for the most part, you'll be able to gauge if your proportions are off if these three major masses are spaced too far apart. And these three major masses don't bend. It's only the pieces in the middle. The abdomen and the neck are the only parts that bend. So once you have those three masses and you figured out space correctly, then you can draw the limbs. Add the limbs after you figure out where the torsos fall, and you'll pretty much be able to accomplish your proportions again by understanding how that the lower leg and the upper leg are the same height, the upper or length, the upper arm and the lower arm are the same length. So again, space out your major masses, and then if you need to double check your limbs, just see if they're the same height, and then you should have correct proportions throughout the body. But again, going back to basic shapes that I talked about earlier, knowing those basic shapes, you can begin to practice, roughly drawing out your proportions of a figure. Again, we're not worried about anatomy. We're not worried about faces, hands, anything like that. We're just practicing proportions. Even if you're drawing stylized, not, stylized characters, practice your proportions. Again, the torso still isn't going to be crazy long. Again, unless you're drawing like a creature, then, have at it. But if you're drawing a human form, the neck and the abdomen aren't going to be super spaced out. Continue practicing drawing the human proportions with flat 2D shapes. Once you've mastered that and you're more comfortable with drawing your proportions, then you can begin to turn those shapes into forms and turning the human in three-dimensional space. But again, you want to start with checking your three major masses: your head, rib cage, and pelvis. You want to draw your limbs, making sure they're the right height or the right length, because these won't change once you begin to draw them in 3D space. So get really comfortable with drawing the 2D form first in basic shapes. Once you have that, then practice the cubes that you were drawing in your sketchbook all this time and all the cubes you've been practicing. Put that practice to use by turning those shapes into forms, because what that allows you to do is turn the body in three-dimensional space and know and be confident that your proportions are correct, because then you can draw silly poses, crazy poses, throwing the arm. Like, you get to just practice, especially in your sketchbook. You don't need reference for this. This is when you just have fun and practice proportions by drawing those three major body masses in space and then adding limbs to them. Just see if you can add limbs and see if the proportions look correct and feel correct by you turning it in space. But again, just start with those three major masses, and it'll be super helpful once you begin to attach limbs to them. Remember to keep practicing drawing those forms in your sketchbook. Drawing the cubes, cylinders, and spheres, because these make up the human body. Grab your sketchbook, find some images on Pinterest, and see if you can replicate them only using form. Like, draw over them or have the reference beside you, and see if you can draw that person, that figure, only using form. Once you practice that, then again, go back to your sketchbook and see if you can create your own humanoid forms just using what you've learned so far. See if you can draw the head, rib cage, and pelvis, and then see if you can attach limbs to them and see if the proportions feel correct. Check the leg length again, check the arm lengths. Do they match? Are they the same length? Are the pelvis and the rib cage spaced correctly? And again, if you have questions and if you feel like you're not sure if it maybe it feels right, wrong, and you don't know why, go get more reference and look at actual humans and bodies to see if, okay, where's the rib cage falling and where's the pelvis starting? Where's the head starting versus where's the rib cage starting? All of this will help you build your confidence when you are ready to draw your own characters, your own designs. This will help you build confidence in the way your figures are coming out, the way they will feel in proportion. But that comes with, again, practicing these basic skills of drawing shapes and forms and representing the human body with these basic shapes and forms. But once you start drawing your characters, remember to start loose. Drawing with forms can stiffen the drawing, so you do want to remember to stay loose, but keep in mind the things you've learned about proportions. So as you're drawing, you're staying loose, but you're still thinking about these things. You're starting with the gesture drawing. You're starting with building your shapes and forms on top of that gesture, and then you're fleshing out your design. Again, with all this takes practice, a lot of mileage to get fully comfortable and confident in it. So take your time. Don't rush through any part of this. Don't rush through drawing with only shapes before you move into drawing with forms. Like, take the time you feel like you need to nail it down, to gain your confidence with just working with shapes, learning proportions that way, and then move on to forms. Everybody's different, so maybe it takes you, I don't know, 20 sketchbook pages, I don't know. Or maybe it takes you the whole sketchbook, I don't know. But again, take your time, put the mileage in, practice, remember to look at reference of human figures, so that you can better build your visual library of what the human proportions really look like. But again, thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment. So in the upcoming videos, I'll be going over light and shadow, as well as another video on color theory basics. If you haven't done so already, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll know when I upload. And thank you for joining me. Until next time, keep drawing.